Okay, so we'll get started here, Carrie, with give us a little look back on your term and kind of what you know now that you didn't know then, and talk a little bit about the things you're proud of, and we'll start there.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I just finished my first term, which is 4 years, and obviously where I was 4 years ago to what I know now has been a very educational curve, but it's been an exciting curve too to be a part of. I was in a great place. And so it's been great to be a part and to learn all about all the processes that go into it. I used to go down to the Capitol and talk about the importance of quality of life and economic development and tourism and those things. So to be on this side of the fence, I've learned a whole lot and been able to look at it from a different lens cap view. I work full time, so I wear both hats. And so that's been interesting and challenging, but it's also been very, very rewarding. This past year and building up to this past year, we passed the most monumental tax history bill for Iowa. And I think it's something we're going to be talking about for years to come. So it's been an honor to be a part of the legislation that has built up to that, but it's really to see how that works and flows with any type of policy that we've been working on. Policy obviously sometimes takes time, and it's good to be a part of that team and subcommittees and committee work to see how that actually flows into legislation.
And remind us what committees and subcommittees you serve on.
Sure. So this past, most of the years, I've served on appropriations all 4 years. So this most recent year, I chaired the ethics committee. I vice chaired commerce. I serve on appropriations, state government, transportation, and I also chair the economic development budget. So pretty big, heavy committee list, 6 committees. I enjoy them all. They're all different, obviously. My first few years, I served on Veterans Affairs, and I learned a lot about those issues. And as new colleagues come into our caucus, there's a switcheroo on committees, but also kind of your expertise and wheelhouse. And it's been really enjoyable because some of the committees I've been on has been my wheelhouse, and it's been my expertise in my professional career. And then some committees you're put on and you learn a lot about. And so it's been, I wouldn't say challenging, it's been rewarding because you learn a lot about stuff that's going on in the transportation department across the entire state and how that mirrors and works together federally and statewide. But obviously this year I had the honor and privilege to chair the economic development budget. And that's obviously been something I've been, my career's been focused on for the past 32 years. So it's been enlightening. And I've enjoyed chairing commerce or vice chairing commerce because we don't have an economic development growth committee like the House does. We funnel a lot through commerce. We funnel prescription, we funnel utility, we funnel economic development issues. I had the privilege of running the governor's broadband bill the past few years. So that was probably something that I learned a lot about. So commerce is kind of, I call it a catch-all committee because a lot of those things that flow in economic development, workforce, and all those things do flow through that committee. And so it's always an interesting committee to be on because it really captures a lot of different veins that affect businesses across the state.
And tell me about what that means when you say that the economic development budget. So like what kinds of projects would come before the state in through the economic development budget?
Yeah, so the economic development budget is about a $58 million budget. It really focuses on a lot of career paths, the Iowa Department of Economic Development, the Iowa Finance Authority, Future Ready Iowa. But like the Iowa Department of Economic Development, they oversee a lot of different facets. For example, they have, the business division, they have the tourism division, they have the economic development division. And so it's been really good to kind of work with, like, for example, Future Ready Iowa, because how does that flow into the workforce to create economic development? And it's a lot of private-public partnership models and platforms that the state offers. For example, cultural affairs is also in that line item budget. So it's kind of a catch-all. There's a lot that oversees in that budget, a lot of programming, as well as a lot of departments that the state has. So it's my passionate area because obviously my past has been on Chamber of Commerce, Convention Visitors Bureau, and tourism work. And so it was an honor to oversee that budget and know kind of where I thought the needs were and where they would best fit to help grow our economy.
Have there been specific things in that arena, or maybe in one of your other committees, that you think particularly connects back to your constituency? Like any projects that are specific to this area, or things that you think would benefit our area?
We have, to be honest, our area's benefited a lot in all the different bills and committees that we've had, not just necessarily the Economic Development Committee. We've got some programming that we've obviously been at the table at and a voice on. And I think that's what's nice about serving in the Senate or as an elected position, is your voice is at around a table that represents your district or your professional knowledge. For example, when I go into a committee meeting or I go into caucus, my wheelhouse is economic development, tourism, rural Iowa growth, economy, downtown development, rural Iowa needs, where I may be sitting next to somebody that covers a section of Des Moines. And so those needs are totally different from urban versus rural Iowa. And so it's an honor to have that rural Iowa voice and our district's voice around that table in every department. And then, for example, if there's an agriculture issue, that's where I usually rely on Senator Zumbaugh, because that's his wheelhouse. So it's been nice to have that voice among my peers when there is economic development issues or growth issues, that I kind of get to serve as that voice within our caucus.
Carrie, could you talk a little bit about what the Transportation Committee does?
Sure. The Transportation Committee, they do an array of things, whether it is roads, it's working with the DOT, it's working with federal funding that comes into our state. I look at it as a commerce issue. I mean, we need good roads because we have a lot of commerce going through the Midwest and through our state. So we could be working on agriculture bills, we could be working on bridge bills, infrastructure funding, billboards. I mean, it's kind of a catch-all. Anything that you see on the roadways, speed limits, signage across the state, a lot of that falls in the Transportation Committee. So it's not just actually vehicles. It's, it suits farmers' needs, it suits commerce needs, as well as Iowans.
So I guess my question would be, is it restricted to land? And the reason I ask is because, the Dubuque Regional Airport lost commercial air service this month. And that's got a pretty significant impact on Dubuque's economy and our ability to travel, especially from the business community. I can speak firsthand to that. I was on a business trip last week and had to fly into Cedar Rapids and arrived at 11:30 p.m. and then had an hour and a half drive ahead of me. And so I'm just curious as to your thoughts on, in your position, what you could do to help restore commercial air service in Dubuque.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a really good working relationship. I sit down with the Cedar Rapids Airport and the Dubuque Airport quite frequently, and we talk about those issues that impact, obviously, it's a commerce issue. It's a business issue. I fly often for work. I completely understand. And it's serving as an inconvenience to us that usually use the Dubuque Airport. But to be honest, it's a federal issue. And a lot of people get federal issues and state issues collided together or mixed up a little bit. It comes back to it's pretty much a federal issue in regards to how, the state government doesn't say we need to minimize traffic into the Dubuque Airport. That isn't something that the state government does. But what we can do and what we did do is enhance the funding that goes to those mechanisms. We are huge supporters of our airport and our traffic coming in and out of the state. And in fact, I think some of the CARES Act money significantly went to Dubuque and some of those middle of the road airports in regards to size. And so, but what we can do is work with our Dubuque officials and the district's officials, and we can help relay them and carry that message to our federal officials. But a lot of it is working with the airlines too. I mean, let's face it, there's a workforce crisis, and it's impacting, the workforce across the airports and the airlines and every industry across Iowa. And I think that all had to go play with some of that too. Ticket counts, policies, pricing, as well as, how many people are utilizing that mechanism, and can the federal government and or the airlines still continue to use Dubuque as a hub?
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Jump in here. So Carrie, you're talking a little bit about one of the things you mentioned already is being able to provide a voice for rural Iowa and the needs and stuff. So I was kind of curious, maybe looking back at your time in the Senate so far. I mean, what have we been doing to kind of support rural Iowa, and what remains to be done?
Sure. Well, I think, rural Iowa is, many of us come to Des Moines, to the capital, and representing our area, and rural Iowa is very strong down there. Each Senate district represents about 63,000 people. So it's not just a section of a city. It is, I'm going down there representing 45 to 47 communities, depending on my old district or my new district. And so you're going down there representing, 45 to 47 communities. That's extremely rural. So I think that there's a lot of things that we benefit from, whether it's revitalization of our downtowns, historic tax relief, property taxes, agriculture, farming credits. All of those things I think impact rural Iowa. We need to make sure that we have a good education system, we have hospitals, we have a workforce, we have quality of life in rural Iowa. So we want people to maintain and stay here in rural Iowa. And some people, we all know, we all probably live differently, even just the four of us. Some of us want to live in a larger city, and some of us want to live in a bedroom community and commute into work. And so I think that's where rural Iowa has seen a niche. And I think we've been having a solid voice around that table, representing our specific district down there. Whether it be, you look at this specific district, it's agriculture, it's business, it's roadways, it's 4-lane highways. We have a very unique and prospering district up here. And to see those collide with urban and rural working together with our partnerships with economic development and all those partners around the table, I think it's definitely a strength that we have up here.
Are there specific measures that you could point to that maybe you were a part of working on that you think benefited rural Iowans?
Yeah. Well, for example, a perfect example is our transportation equity in the economic or in the education budget. Not every district needs rural transportation equity, but we fought really, really hard for it. And we have almost $39.5 million. So nearly $30 million of transportation equity goes into rural Iowa schools. And that's something that benefits us because that money can now be spent in the classroom and not on busing and transportation. I have the largest territorial school district in the state. And so for me to sit around that table in the education committee and appropriations committee and voice that opinion for rural Iowa that our needs are different. We need that $30 million transportation equity to help our school districts so our schools can still thrive and still have a budget equality that's mirroring their image. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest issues. And every issue I talk about, I think equals quality of life. But I think rural transportation equity in our education system is by far the biggest benefit in that, because that's our largest portion of our budget that the state spends is in our education department.
We talked with your opponent last week, and he described the Senate District 33 as we were talking about the makeup of it sort of politically. And I guess that I had thought of it as a Republican leaning district. And he said, he described it as like a third of Democrats, Republicans, and no party or independent. Is that your understanding of what the new district makeup looks like?
The new district makeup has changed a little bit from the previous makeup of it. I would say the independent, there's quite a bit of, a third is probably right. I would say the numbers are showing us a little bit more Republican and conservative leaning district. When I look at the numbers that are provided to me, it looks like it's quite a bit up, but we also have a big audience that is shifting, or not shifting, but relies on the independent market, independent voters. But we have seen the Republican population increase in some of the areas that were Democrat leaning.
And thinking about some of the issues that are out there and kind of how that plays out with your constituents. So let's talk a little bit about the governor's voucher plan, for lack of a better word. you were supportive of that. It didn't end up going through. What do you hear about that back from back home? Any room for change on that, or tell us how you arrived at that vote?
Sure. Well, as you'll notice, I've got a great record for funding public education. We did have the school choice bill. Now, if you remember right, there was the governor's school choice bill, there was the Senate bill, and there was the House bill, and they all three were different. And so it really kind of depends on the makeup and language of the bill. So, obviously, school choice, it shouldn't just be for rich parents. It should be available to the single moms, the lower income families, the two-parent working households. School choice shouldn't just be for rich and entitled families. And I think that that's what that bill that we voted on in the Senate actually did. I will tell you, in my district, I'm blessed with some great public schools, and I'm blessed with some really great private schools. And so if kids are flooding from a private school to a public school or vice versa, there's a problem with the school system, correct? And I think I have a great record of proving that. I mean, Iowa taxpayers spend $7,413 of just state money on every student. So when you open a door to a classroom, the state is really spending $15,745 federal and state funding per student. And so our education system, what it was now and what it was years ago, has totally changed. We need a strong public foundation school system in our state. If we don't have a strong public school foundation, where do our communities and where do our Iowans lie? But at the end of the day, it's their taxpayer money deciding what school they want it to go to. And school choice is putting parents in the driver's seat. If their school is underperforming or for their individual child, then those parents know best where that child fits best. And like I said, our district has great public schools and we've got great private schools. But when I'm sitting next to a senator in a room that their private schools their public schools are not fulfilling the needs of that student, or they're walking the halls with their rapist, or whatever the system may be, my stories are different than somebody that I'm sitting in a big rural urban school district are. And so that's where we have to listen to those concerns. So we can't beat our educational system. The record shows it's our highest thing that we fund in the state. And I don't see that changing. But what I do see is putting parents in the driver's seat a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I think you hear the same argument within the city of Dubuque that, we have two strong school systems here, public and parochial. And so, perhaps less of an issue, but certainly we hear, from virtually all the public schools that they could use, that they need more funding. There were some pretty difficult decisions made in Dubuque in the last 2 years based on to close public schools based on funding. And I'm sure some of the urban districts where there's an even greater disparity between the quality of public versus private, it seems counterintuitive to then see the public school getting less money, even though, I take your point about the parents' choice, but how do you make that public school that's not maybe up to par better without more state support?
Well, it's kind of nonsense saying that we don't fund public education, because that to be honest, the facts, if you look at any of the facts on public education, what we fund, that would be totally opposite, that we're not funding schools. We spend.
Sure. I don't mean to imply that they're not funding, but just, the public school leaders would like to be funded at a higher level and feel like money could make up the difference in some of the shortcomings of their school.
Yeah. Well, last year, for example, we put another $172 million just in K through 12. That's on top of what we funded. So $172 million. And so since fiscal year 17, we've increased funding over $400 million. So we obviously are supporting our public education. Now, I will tell you what we are seeing, and we've been doing a lot of surveys and digging into this, because the narrative is nonsense. But the administration has grown 60-some%. The students have not grown, but the administration fees have grown. almost, yes, about 67%. So we're seeing a lot of that is how can we get money into the classrooms? How can we get money into, we need to make sure that we've got a good public education system, obviously, but we're also funding the teachers at a quality level. And we've got IPERS programs and things like that. It's really not necessarily such a lack of funding issue. It may be a lack of administration issue on where those funds are being dispersed.
Okay, just to make sure I understood that correctly, what you said about the administration has grown 67%, meaning the number or the money spent on school
Both.
administration?
Yep, the administration and the funding spent on that has grown. Now the student population has not. And we've got that all broke down into districts that we're really looking at. And so, and believe me, I talk to teachers every day. We have teachers that, where school's at now today is not where school was at years ago. The respect for the teachers and this, I had a teacher that's been teaching for many, many years that said they're going out of teaching. They were told to, F off 22 times in one day. Now my kids, if they got in trouble at school, they knew they were in bigger trouble at home, and that, just to be honest, we blame the funding a lot on that, but I think it's a whole different situation on why the schools are struggling. It's a whole issue from the student level to the teacher level to the administration to the school board. And like I said, if you're throwing money at a problem if you throw money at a problem, it's probably not the cure. So continuing to throw money at a problem, I don't think is going to make our school systems better.
Okay. Any other issues, I guess, in the education realm that you'd like to point out, measures that maybe you worked on?
Yeah, another thing that we did besides, funding education, like I said, additional $400 million since fiscal year 17, which is right before I came into office. So that's pretty significant record vote that, we could say that I have on my record supporting that. We also did expanded operational sharing with schools. So schools can do operational sharing to help them save costs. And last year and the year before, we added therapeutic classroom funding. So there's a lot of things that we have been, I would say, earmarking or making sure that there's operational sharing so our rural Iowa schools can share those services and offer them to their students. Because we're seeing a big need in the growth of that, whether it be mental health, whether it be therapeutic classrooms, whether it be school resource officers. So we've increased a lot of funding and policy to make sure that our schools can have those implemented.
Carrie, can you take us through a little bit of the measures that you were faced with through the pandemic, kind of how the state handled some of the things that arose and how the state led Iowans through that crisis?
Yeah. Well, it was a pandemic and it was a crisis and there was no playbook for it. When you run for office, you're not saying, hey, give me the playbook on COVID and the pandemic. There is no playbook. And so we had to work through that. And, we went down and worked through that at session. And I think Iowa took a pretty bold lead, and I think it was a significant lead. And I think national leaders were calling all of us saying, how did you do this? And how can we do this? So I think we set the stage for nationally on how we could lead through that. I look back at it and I think we did a great job. We got kids back in the classroom. Parents were contacting us. We're looking at school scores from those years, and you will see a significant decline. Some of those kids didn't even come back to school. But we had to get kids back into the classroom because we were failing them by not offering that service. And I think Iowa took the lead on that, and I don't think we regret it at all. Like I said, there was no playbook for it. So we had to take a lot of studies. We had to take a lot of risks, and we had to take a lot of bold moves based on the science that was at hand. And I think Iowa, whether it been in the education industry or the business industry, through that CARES Act money, they could help, significantly where that was needed. But at the end of the day, the pandemic hurt our economy. And there's probably not a business that will tell you that it did not. And so we are trying to grow out of that. And I think we need to focus ahead and not focus on the pandemic anymore. We need to say, where can we grow, and where can we keep leading? And unfortunately, the hospitality industry lost some businesses through it. But I don't think that was just Iowa significant. And so I think that Iowa helped protect a lot of their businesses to the best nature that they could. And it was important for us to look at the future of Iowa, which is our children, and get them back around the learning table.
While Iowa did a lot of great things related to the pandemic, there was certainly some controversy over the testing and the governor selecting a out-of-state partner for some of the initiatives. And I'm just curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like I said, you don't have a playbook for that. I think we did what we did the best at the time. And I think we went with, reputation. I think we went with where Iowans going to be protected most. And I don't question her decisions in that department at all. I think she did a great job in the circumstances she was in for leading our state through this pandemic. And I know a lot of governors have reached out to her, have reached out to other elected officials, reached out to us and said, how did you guys get that done? And it was leadership.
Carrie, you talked a little bit about focused on the future and talking about commerce and workforce. Obviously, workforce is an issue that it's tough to see where that goes away. What is kind of the game plan long term here, and what can you do as a state lawmaker to help kind of address some of those issues?
Yeah, well, it's a big issue and it's a big concern of mine. Obviously, every industry I talk to in my district, across the state, across the nation, is struggling with workforce. It's not just an Iowa we're not just in Iowa suffering from this issue. It's a national issue. And so there's not just one bill or one step, I think, that can change all this. It's going to take a lot of private-public partnerships and unity and voices around the table. And that's really what we've been doing, is putting voices around the table and say, at the end of the day, how can we make Iowa appealing so people want to live here, people want to work here? Our population hasn't grown since 2008. And so that's where we stepped back and said, how can we make Iowa an appealing place and a quality of life state? And to grow our population, to grow our workforce, to grow our people thriving in our state. We want our state to be thriving with workforce. So it's taken, businesses working together. It's taken a lot of state and local partnerships with our economic development offices. And really our tax bill that we passed last year, that is appealing. We want to keep Iowans in Iowa, or we want people to come to Iowa. For example, our tax bill, we're not going to tax retirement. And so we want people to live in Iowa, not move to Florida for 6 months, one day out of the year. They can go visit all they want when it's cold here, but we want to keep them residents and good stewards of Iowa. And I think that overall helps our economy. And let's look at it. Our retirees are great mentors, are great volunteers, are great, employer innovation driven people as well. And so I think that all feeds into that. Now, workforce, another thing that I will tell you that we did pass that I think what helps with workforce is a broadband bill. People that live in Iowa may not work in Iowa. They may be working in Illinois, they may be working remotely. And I think that's something that we've really made sure that we make sure that our workers can work remotely and still live in Iowa. Now, there's things that also flow into workforce. There's affordable housing, quality daycare options. And so those are things that we had to step back and say, how can we put some tools in the toolbox to enhance all this? And that's what we've done with all of our childcare tax credits. That's what we've done with businesses partnering together. As you noticed, Dubuque just got awarded 3 childcare last week. And, as a working mom of 4 children, that was important to me. I needed a good quality place to bring my kids so I felt comfortable going into the workforce. And so I knew that we could raise our family and still have vibrant incomes or quality careers and quality daycare for our children. So I can see that firsthand as a parent, how that's a concern. So those are all things: quality, affordable housing, quality of life issues. Another thing is we need to make sure our communities are strong. Everyone wants to go home at night and be proud of where they live. They want a community they want a thriving community that's got trails and recreation and entertainment and outdoor activities. People want to go home to those communities. That makes people want to live there. That makes people want to build houses here. So I think, the Future Ready Iowa program is another perfect example on things that we enhanced for the workforce. We are getting in and we're doing apprenticeships. We're doing volunteer mentoring. We're doing employer innovation funding. We're doing tax credits. We, banned the COVID-19 the COVID-19 vaccine passports that some of the workplaces required, because that was a barrier issue as well. So the workforce housing tax credit. So all those things that I just mentioned all go into that workforce thing. You know, I think it's important to make sure that our workforce, we get into the schools younger. We need to get into 4th and 5th grade to say it's okay to go into trades. It's okay to go into community colleges. And I think that barrier has been huge to make sure that we're also promoting the trades and our community college avenues and offering mentorships and classes that are feeding into those programs through our educational system.
Do you think that there's a role for increasing an increased immigrant population in Iowa to play in growing population and growing workforce?
You know, I think it depends on this. If you're talking about a specific bill, I think that that's going to have to be handled very carefully. Obviously, I think there's a need for it, but I think we need to make sure we're talking legal immigrants. I mean, that's something too that I think there's a big concern. And I think as long as we have legal immigrants and that there's that type of a system and safety net that is provided by a partnership, then yes, then I think that is a significant role that we can look at to help our workforce. Obviously, we have sanctuary of cities and things like that that all come into play with that. So I think as long as we're doing it safely and the word legal is included in all that, then I definitely think that can be a workforce initiative that many businesses will take part in.
Is there any bills that you can point to in the last 4 years where you have maybe not voted with what's typically with your party, where you broke ranks with the Republican Party or anything like that?
I can't think specifically. I mean, we really work solidly as a team. I mean, and we all have listening ears, you know, and if there's a bill that maybe we're not comfortable on, for example, one bill that took me some time to get used to was the ethanol bill. You know, I felt like I was picking winners and losers in my district, and it took a lot of time for me to sift through. And I was one of the people that paused on that in the Senate and said, the House rammed that through pretty quickly. And if you notice, the Senate paused on it for about 2 years. And it was because of voices like mine and other people that said, we need to make sure that this mechanism is nurtured, that we've got the facts at the table. So there's a lot of things that we did that maybe had a pause mode, not a kill mode, but a pause mode. And I think that your voice helps change those bills into law. And for example, our tax plan, that's something that we may not all been in agreement on, or our education funding. But once again, we offer fixes and language fixes to that before it even comes to the forefront to vote on. And so a lot of people think, how do you vote on that final bill? But they don't realize the steps that go into it and the conversations, the hard conversations and the negotiations that say, you know, I would be comfortable with that bill if we took this out of it or if we included this in on it. And that's where I think a lot of people don't realize the comfort level that you get to before you push that button. And the broadband bill would be a perfect example of that. The E15 bill, the ethanol bill would be a perfect example of that. Our education funding bills would all be perfect examples of those mechanisms. And like I said, our broadband bill, our ethanol bill, and our education bill are all perfect examples of how maneuvering language and pieces that I felt more comfortable with putting in those bills that I had a seat at that table to do.
And were those, I mean, the education bill was pretty split down partisan lines. Was the broadband bill more of a bipartisan effort? I don't recall how that came out.
It was a bipartisan effort because we did scaling for rural Iowa. I mean, we had broadband deserts in Iowa. And so, you know, we had to explain that to the urban Iowans. We had to say, you know, I've got this many, I ran the bill. So I had to go to those partners and say, rural Iowa needs this. Urban Iowa may have it, but we've got broadband deserts. We've got workforce working in these places that can't even work from home because of our deserts and broadband. And so, like I said, at the end of the day, when you throw some of those things up on the board, broadband, education, the ethanol bill, the tax bill, all those things, you sometimes, 96% of our bills are bipartisan. And that's what the media doesn't portray. 96% of our bills are bipartisan agreement bills. And if you go back on the voting record, you will showcase that. It's the 4% that are not. It's the 4% that make the news. It's the portray that the media wants to portray, that there's this dysfunction of party lines down there. And to be honest, I think we work pretty well together. I don't know how anyone could have voted against that tax bill. It was pretty much a party line vote to say we're not going to be passing tax savings onto our Iowans. Education bills, that's another perfect example. This year we gave them another, $170 some million, and they voted no on that. So unfortunately, it looks like it's a partisan issue, but sometimes you really have to delve deep into the subcommittees and the committee work to know where those votes and voices are coming from.
Was the rural broadband something that there were Democrats working with you on that in promoting that?
Oh, absolutely. Subcommittees either consist of 3 people or 5 people, and it was a 5-person subcommittee. So that will tell you the strength of that bill. And that's kind of where I would say we listen to bipartisanship and bipartisan committee members on those issues to make it into a solid bill that benefits everybody. So they feel like it's a win for their district and their constituents too. They have a voice around the table. And like I said, our subcommittees and committees, anyone can tune into those and see where those voices are heard and come from.
And switching gears, I wanted to see what, if any, legislation you would be working for in the coming year regarding abortion rights in the state, and kind of how that gels with where you think the majority of Iowans fall on that issue.
Yeah, well, obviously I have a record for pro-life votes. I'm a mother of 4. The courts are going to take another look at this. And at the end of the day, it needs to go to the vote of Iowans. Let the Iowans speak. Let the Iowans decide where we're going to be on this issue. And so, I think that that's a huge thing that people realize, that the people of America decide. We should not be in the abortion business. I mean, abortion is not birth control, in my opinion. And so I think we need to bring it to the vote of the people, and that's probably the route that it's going to be going.
So what would that look like? That it'd be something on the ballot for Iowans?
Yeah, if it passes 2 consecutive sessions, then it would go to the vote of the people, just like the Second Amendment that's going to be on the ballot this November. So I think that, obviously I'm a pro-life candidate. I would stand behind that. And, I'm a mother of 4. And so those things are top of mind to me. And I listen to my constituents with that. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to go to the vote of the Iowans, and that's where we'll have to make our decisions.
Yeah, I guess I think it seems like there's, a bit of a range of things when you talk about something like a fetal heartbeat bill versus, something else that would be maybe a little more moderate. I don't know. So you'd be in favor of a fetal heartbeat bill?
Well, I'd have to look at the specific bill. I mean, when you say, there's exceptions and there's all those things that we put into bill. And when you're asking me that question, none of those exceptions exist in a bill. So, I mean, it would depend on the definition of a bill. But I'm obviously, like I said, you look back, I'm a pro-life candidate.
So what would the ideal bill look like in your eyes?
I think the ideal bill would be for us to obviously listen to our constituents, and I think that it, once again, my bill would be bring it past the constitutional stage, two sessions, and get it to the vote of the people, because all of Iowans should be able to vote on that issue and see where we stand on that. But like I said, I'm pretty pro-life. And I know that there's exceptions and things like that, and I'm open to all of those exceptions in that discussion, but not seeing a bill in its final form is pretty hard to judge that hard line. But like I said, my record shows you I'm pretty pro-life.
Carrie, as you're campaigning, what issues that we haven't talked about yet are you hearing from voters that they're concerned about and that you could take a lead on if you were reelected?
Yeah. Obviously, inflation, it's a real concern. It's a real fear for people. There hasn't been one constituent or door knock that I haven't knocked on that people are concerned about the high inflation, rising rates, and they're worried. I mean, it's a real fear for people. and it's a real concern. So growth increases are on the rise, and it's impacting not just working Iowans, it's impacting fixed incomes on seniors. It's impacting our growth incentives for first homeowners, people that are trying to start families, people that are graduating for college and trying to manage inflation and their student loans. And so there isn't an age group that I don't talk to. And so we have to fight inflation, and that is going to be working on our tax policy and bettering our tax policy bit by bit by bit. And I think we're going to be working on some implementing some strong tax bills. When I'm listening and hearing all that at the door, it thrives me and pushes me to make sure that I go down there and be that voice for that. We balanced budgets are important. We need to control our spending, and we need to make sure that our hardworking people are keeping more of their money into their checkbooks so they can help keep up with this. And I don't know how anyone's going to keep up with inflation, to be honest. And like I said, it's a real concern. It's a real problem, and people are actually highly feared of this. And when I talk to those people, I feel the same pain that they do. And so that'll be a voice that I make sure that we carry down to Des Moines, saying, what can we do to make sure Iowan can put as many bars up as we can to help with this high inflation that we're all enduring?
As we wrap up here, Carrie, is there anything else that you'd like to point to? Maybe you bring up with a voter when they're asking about, so what have you accomplished there? What are you proud of?
It's been an honor to serve this district the past 4 years, and I look forward to serving another term for 4 more. It's been very rewarding to go down there and be a part of monumental legislation. Our property tax bill, our broadband bill, our workforce bills that we've done, our economic development bills that we've accomplished. We've seen growth in all of that. And we've, built up our rainy day fund. And it's been, people are concerned about their checkbooks. And like I said, so I look forward to continuing that momentum on this great stuff that we built upon this past 4 years that I've been an honor to be a part of. It's been an honor to serve in leadership. I'm assistant majority leader, so I have a strong voice around those tables, and I look forward to continuing to be a strong voice for our district around the majority table. And that's where it's going to make a difference for our district.
Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for visiting with us today, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Carrie.
50 days and counting. So thanks for bearing with us. Thanks for your time. I have a countdown app on my phone. I look at it every morning. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. But thanks for all you do. And pro Iowa, here I go. 50 days on the trail left. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.